Welcome back, and what a delight to have back with us today our good friend Jodell Onstott. She's the author of YHWH Exists, this incredible research book. And wow, what a book. And we have talking to her today about the 10 Commandments. There's a picture of it there on the screen. By the way, you can go to YHWHExist.com. That is Jodell's website, YHWHExist.com. And we were going to talk about, for the next couple of visits here, the 10 Commandments. And by the way, Jodell, let me just say this. I had lunch yesterday with some friends after church, and my friend leaned over to me and he goes, "Perry, thanks a lot." He said, "I got that YHWH Exists book, and I've started reading it, and I find myself not putting it down, and then it's so much, I have to go back and reread what I read just to make sure I got it." So you are impacting lives.
Well, that is wonderful to hear. Thank you for sharing that, Perry.
And I thought, well, I told him, I said, "Man, I didn't think you were that kind of a reader." But he got it, and he's going through it, and it's really impacting him, and he's learning a lot. So I just want to say to our viewers and listeners, get a copy of this book. It is not an overnight read. It's a resource. And how many years did it take you to put this together?
It really took about 15 years to put together. There was a lot of late nights, 20-hour days of research that went into it. And it's been a blessing to me as well. But you're right. It is not something you're going to pick up and read for a couple hours and just put down. It's a process.
All right. Well, we all go through Sunday school. We're taught out of Exodus, the 10 Commandments. We're taught the story that God spoke to Moses. He writes them on the tablet. He brings them down. At one time, they were posted in our schools and in our courtrooms. They have been selectively kicked out now. But I guess the question is, when they first were given to Moses and he brings them down and he gives them to the children of Israel, how revolutionary were the Big Ten?
You know, they were extremely revolutionary, and this is why. Throughout the ancient world, it doesn't matter the law code that you look at or the society that you investigate. You find that every single society had a class of haves and have-nots, where the elites of that society extracted labor, money, and resources from a subservient class. So what happens with the 10 Commandments is God establishes this idea that everyone is equal under the law. This is a revolutionary concept. Even the Hammurabi Code, you had rights given to the citizens of Babylon that were different from the lower class of slaves or immigrants. But what you have with the 10 is 10 categories. You know, it's kind of a misnomer that they are 10 specific commandments. Rather, in Hebrew, it's the idea that they are 10 categories of commandments. And the later Mosaic Code really fills in the specifics of those categories. But you find that what God did with Israel's elite society, which would have been the Levites, is that they were the people that had the extractive institution. They received and benefited from Israel's labor via taxation. God constitutionally defined this taxation at 10%, so it could not just be unchecked. It was held accountable. God also limited the land resources they could have. This kept the Israel's elite class very poor and very dependent on the wealth and the welfare of Israel's extractive society. So it was something that was revolutionary of its day. But how God achieved this unity and this is called an egalitarianism society, which is a fancy word for the idea that everyone was equal under the law. How God did that was establishing this idea of one God, one law of liberty, and one philosophy of right and wrong. It provided incredible unity for Israel's society, and it did not provide a base where there were people that were privileged under the law and privileged and people that did not have access to the law. So it's really something that we see for the first time in history is this idea of a universal law code applicable to all people under the law.
So when Moses gave it to the children of Israel, they still wandered around for quite a few years before they crossed over. They had plenty of time to assimilate this into their society, into their culture, and into their justice system.
They really did. You find that Israel is really this ongoing process where each generation attempts to strive and to apply it a little bit better. During the Judges era, you find that certain generations would live by it, others would decline from it. One of the customs that really plagued Israel during the Judges era was this idea of covenanting and offering treaties to the other tribes that were there in Canaan before Israel. It wasn't until Deborah that we see Israel stopped offering treaties and accepting tribute. The same thing we can kind of see in America today with the people that we want to treaty with and we want to accept. A lot of the times those treaties and what seems to be an offer of friendship comes back to bite us in the behind because it comes with it other standards and other values that, like Sharia, eventually apply to our citizens, often unintentionally.
You know, we're, just to fast forward for a moment, we're seeing that today. I mean, look at the trouble over the last week or so in America. It's dividing between classes and race.
It really is. You find that for ancient Israel, this idea of a unifying law code is something that brings us together. It is something that makes us united under one people and one God. You know, our Pledge of Allegiance, you know, for those schools that still say it and those people that can remember it, you know, one nation under God. This is something we have lost. Now we become this nation divided under many gods. There's traditional Judeo-Christian values we have held are not the same that we have today. The ideas of righteousness and justice that we held for our founding fathers are not those that are imbibed and those that are accepted by people today. We really want to rush to violence, rush to protest, rather than exploring the channels that we have through our system of justice and through more peaceful means.
I wanted to get into some of these in just a moment here, Jodell, but if it's not being practiced in the culture, I mean, pretty much our society has kicked those virtues out. But they seem to still exist at some levels of our culture, maybe a remnant within churches and within families. Do you think that's still there?
I think it is. The difference that we see between ancient Israel's law code and modern societies, the number one resource, the number one natural resource that God recognized as a value and a base of liberty for Israel's society was the family institution. So God did everything he could to protect the family, whether it was limiting taxation, granting lands that made families very wealthy, as well as protecting rights. You know, there's much discussion on the morality code and how it applies to the United States today. What we fail to remember or to recognize is ancient Israel's law code served to do one thing, and that was to protect, foster, and to cause families, individual families, to become very wealthy and to thrive so that more families would propagate upon the land. And this makes for a very strong society. When families don't reproduce, you are more likely to be taken over by your enemies who can reproduce faster than you can. So this is a military, it is a issue of national security. So God did this. He protected the family in every way. He granted them equal rights with the monarch of the land, which was really unprecedented. So today, I think if we start investing on our families once again, our families can regenerate. We can really return very, very quickly to a society that is less extractive of the family and values them and instills resources in the psychological health, the emotional health, as well as the moral health of the family, because that is what will pave the way for a prosperous future.
Well, beautiful. All right, let me take a break here, and when we come back, we'll take on, we're not going to get through all 10 of these today by any means, but we want to start going down the list. What's so interesting about this, Jodell, is I don't even think the average person, and I don't even know if it's taught in seminary, what the meaning was behind each one. In the Constitution, we have the Federalist Papers. We can go back and read the Federalist Papers to find out what really is meant in the Constitution. But I don't know if believers, we've ever been taught what is the full meaning behind each one of the 10 Commandments. And I want you to take your time and help us walk through that. So we'll take a quick break. Go to YHWH Exists. That's her website. Check out this book. You got to have it. You just got to have it in your library. If you're any kind of a student of biblical history, you got to have this book. It is a must-have. And make a great present for your pastor. If you don't want to read it yourself, get it for him. Anyway, YHWH Exists. We'll be right back.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.
Welcome back, and what a delight and an honor always to have with us our good friend Jodell Onstott. She's the author of an incredible resource book entitled YHWH Exists. That's also her website, YHWHExists.com. And I can't say enough about this book as it relates to probably one of the great history books of all times. And it's just so much in there. You may want to get a copy of it and have it in your library. We're talking about the 10 Commandments. Now, we've been taught those in Sunday school. We've been taught those all our life. They used to be posted in classrooms and courtrooms. It is the basis of our law. But what was really behind each one, and how revolutionary were the 10 Commandments when first introduced to Moses, and then as he presented them to the children of Israel. All right, Jodell, I know we can't go through all of these, but let's take on a few each time we visit here, because I think this is fascinating. But the first one, you shall have no other gods before me. And there's the comment here that somehow that particular commandment, commandment number 1, you shall have no other gods before me, contributes to the new idea of liberty and equality. Help me with this.
Sure. You know, let me just start off by saying we have been taught to see all of these commands through a religious connotation. When we look at them politically as an issue of constitution and governance, it really opens up a whole new world of understanding. So when you have the first commandment, have no other gods before me, it's very fascinating that when God identifies himself to Israel, he doesn't say, you know, I'm the God that did this, I'm the God that does that. He says, I'm the God that brought you out of slavery, out of the house of bondage. You know, Leviticus, inscribed on our Liberty Bell, is this idea that you should proclaim liberty throughout the land. Yeah. Israel's ancient law code. So the first command is this idea that God embraces liberty. And when you go after other deities, when you go after other religious institutions, you're going to follow a way that leads to slavery, that leads to oppression, whereas God has given you this constitution that really works within the framework of what perfect liberty could look like. So anything that you're going to seek is going to be less than that. The second commandment, you know, you shall have no other gods before me, you shall not make any graven images. This is the idea that if you have the perfect way, if you have this way of liberty, if you invite another God or you allow a competing law code system, it's going to take you away from that. It is going to take you to and allowing Sharia to evolves into chaos and into nothing.
Let me do this, folks. Sorry about that. Jodell, just a second. We're having a little bit of a connection problem with you. So if you could just lean back a little bit. There you go. You're getting excited. I think that'll take care of it. Right. And I totally get it. All right. So come back to you shall not make idols. I mean, the first two are clearly suggesting you got to get it straight on who is your God and how he has rescued you. Correct?
Absolutely. It's the idea that God established liberty throughout the land. In Leviticus, it talks about as proclaiming liberty throughout the land. So what the Old Testament law did was it established this constitution that defined liberty for all Israel's citizens. So when you go after another god, as the second command forbids, you go after a lesser way, a path of life that leads to oppression and servitude, whereas God has given you this perfect law of liberty that establishes equality for all members of your society. So you had a lot of competing law codes anciently and modernly. Each temple cult, people don't realize this, but each temple cult wasn't just a religion where you served a god. Usually those temple cults had their own specific law codes that society was supposed to follow. So God really prohibits that, and he secures Israel's peace and her freedom from that competing political source, from that competing religious source that could take her away from the liberty he established.
You know, that is so beautiful. And look where we are today. Pluralism rules. So we have put other gods before him. We have put idols in front of him. Pluralism, if it's allowed to find a total stronghold in the United States like it has in Europe, it'll basically say you cannot quote John chapter 14 where Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and life, and no man comes to the Father through me, because you're raising Jesus higher than any other God. So you can't say that. So all gods are the same when all roads lead to heaven. That's the pervasive thinking in our culture today.
It really is. We have failed to make a distinction between good and evil. We want to, as Bridget brought earlier, we want to see them, all religions, as the same, none having any greater or lesser value than the other. You know, religions, the thing with the Judeo-Christian religion is it values human life and human dignity. You know, those are ideas established in the Torah that you find under no other ancient system of justice. But those today are being relegated to commonplace with all the other law codes, especially Sharia, that we face today. And it's really unfortunate. And this is why we begin to see the breakdown of our culture and our society, because we simply do not follow it.
All right, let's go to number 3, Jodell. This is really interesting because you don't really hear a lot of elaboration on commandment number 3. There's an assumption of what it may mean, and that is, you shall not take the name of your Lord God in vain. It appears that we're violating that quite a bit.
Yeah, you know, the traditional understanding, and this is, you know, what I grew up in church hearing, is that you shouldn't curse. Well, and while I think that's very noble, that's not actually what the text is saying. This is specifically saying you should not take the name of Yahweh or the name of YHWH in vain. That was the specific name of Israel's deity. So you wouldn't use that name to curse, but more specifically, you would not use that name to perform heinous acts. A modern example, in Sharia, how many times, I mean, you can search the internet and you can see video after video where a beating, where a genocide, where all sorts of atrocities are done in the name of Allah. You know, you'll hear something like, you know, before a suicide bomber blows himself up, he'll say, Allah Akbar, or something like that. And it is this concept. You don't use God's name for those types of depravities. His name is to be kept separate, is to be used for things that are uplifting, and is to be used for specifically for taking oaths. So God wanted to hold people accountable. So he said, if you take a contract, you enter into a legal agreement, swear by my name. He says that in Deuteronomy 6:13. Swear in my name, because I won't hold those guiltless that use my name vainly. So this is really one of the only sins that we see in the Ten Commandments where God says, you know, I won't hold you guiltless. So it's a way of keeping unity, keeping integrity and dignity associated with this system of justice and the idea of who God is.
Doesn't it also underscore the seriousness of covenants?
It really does. You know, today we look at contracts as just a legal agreement. Sometimes they're breached. I believe marriage is the contract that is most often breached. One partner may have an infidelity issue and the contract is breached. Anciently, contracts were viewed sacred. Your word, your honor was something that was to be protected and upheld. And by doing that, you really protected the institutions within your society from degenerating into chaos where one group feels maligned, they feel disadvantaged, and they feel taken advantage of versus another group. When you have that internal stability, those types of issues and those types of situations do not have a chance to develop.
You know, if you look in some of our founding documents, Mayflower Compact, the Declaration of Independence, Constitution, they're signed under the heading, "In the year of our Lord." Is that part of that?
You find in ancient times you had a similar thing. For God, when he made a contract with Israel, there was nothing where God could really sign on the dotted line, except perhaps when he handed Moses the 10 commandments. But what you find God did is he would swear in his own name. So when he would make a contract with ancient Israel, or he would promise to do something, the phrase that you find is often used by the prophets or by the people in Israel would be the phrase of "as YHWH lives." And this was a pledge, it was an oath, a signature that really confined you to uphold the stipulations of that contract. And again, it came to this idea of accountability, something that we've really kind of lost in our system of justice today.
All right, this isn't fair to take on number 4, so we may have to finish it because we only got about 3.5 minutes left. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Why is that in there?
This is probably the most important of all the commandments. And I say it's the most important because it is the commandment that brought Israel together in unity. Families were given a day off, and it also elevated man beyond a servant. Servants don't take a day off of work. They work day and night regardless. They obey their master. This made men employers, it made them employees, and it gave them human rights and human dignities. It strengthened families. But more than that, Israel was commanded to have what is called a holy convocation. They would come together in their local communities in one church, not multiple churches, but one community gathering place, and they would study their constitution. This instilled the entire land with unity and liberty because they were all discussing the same ideas, the same topics, and it brought people together for open dialogue and for unifying their hearts and minds according to this document.
The term is keep it holy. I'm concerned about that today because we're just seeing a day of worship as an activity, not an act of holiness.
Yeah, you know, the idea of holiness is often kind of misconstrued. The idea in the Hebrew is that it is set apart. It is kodesh. It is something that is different from all the other 6 days of the week that you do. You're making an investment for the future.
Wow. All right, we're having that problem again. Jodell, let me just say to our viewers and listeners, you need to study this. These are things that she has covered in her book entitled YHWH Exists. There's a picture of it there on the screen. Again, this is no easy read. It's quite a few pages of incredible history and research, and you can check it out. And you can go to YHWHExists.com. And Jodell, I look forward because we have some more to go through. Honor your father and mother, which really is interesting. You shall not murder, and the difference between murder and killing, maybe you'll be taking that out. Commit adultery, not steal, bear false witness, and do not covet. These are all biggies. So thanks for your time, and let's connect real soon so we can get through the rest of these, okay?
Thank you, Perry.
Good to see you. God bless. All right, we'll see you next time on Focus Today.